My name is Derek, and I made a terrible mistake that night at the Grandview Theater. I'd worked there for years, just a regular employee, sweeping the aisles, selling popcorn, cleaning up after the last show. The theater was old, creaky, and often felt like a relic from another time, but it had its charm. One night, I was scheduled for a late shift. We had just finished the last screening of the night, and most of the staff had already left. I was about to lock up when I noticed something odd. A film reel had been left on the counter in the lobby. It was unmarked, completely anonymous. No label, no studio name, just an empty canister that somehow felt wrong. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to play it. I took the reel up to the projection booth and loaded it in. The screen flickered to life, and what I saw made my stomach drop. It was a performance, a play of sorts. The scene was set on a stage, with actors in costumes, but there was something off about them. They didn't move like real people. They were stiff, almost mechanical, and their faces were covered by masks. The audience in the background was eerily quiet, their faces hidden in darkness. But something about the atmosphere made my heart race. I leaned forward in the booth, my hands gripping the control panel. The scene unfolded, but it was strange, unsettling. The actors moved closer together, speaking in hushed tones, though their lips never moved. Then, the stage lights flickered, and the figures on stage, they turned toward the camera. All of them, they stared directly at me, their eyes vacant but knowing. The scene on screen changed. The camera now faced the projection booth, the view from the theater, as if the film was taking place in the exact room where I was sitting. I froze. On screen, the actors were now standing in front of the booth, looking directly at me. Their movements were jerky, unnatural. And then one of them spoke, but not through the speakers. It was a voice that came from behind me, right next to my ear. "You shouldn't have watched." I whipped around, but there was nothing there. The booth was empty. The screen flickered again. The actors were now in the aisle, moving down the rows, walking toward the booth with unnatural speed. I jumped up, knocking over the chair. I ran toward the exit, but it was locked. The door wouldn't open. Panic set in. I was trapped. The figures were getting closer. I could hear their footsteps, their breath, even though the screen was silent. I turned back to the screen, and to my horror, the actors were standing at the booth door. Their masks were gone. Their faces were twisted, distorted in agony. The film went black. I don't know how long I sat there. I don't know how I got out of the theater, but I remember the chill on my skin, the echoing silence that followed me the entire way home. The next day, the reel was gone. The projector had stopped working. The Grandview Theater was quiet once more, but I know what I saw, and now, every night, when I close my eyes, I can hear those footsteps following me. My name is Alex, and I never should have stayed after hours. The Silverbrook Cinema was known for its quirky history, a theater that had seen better days. People said it was haunted, but I never put stock in those stories. I worked as a projectionist, a quiet job where I could focus on films and be left alone. That was until I found the reel. It was buried deep in the storage room, forgotten, collecting dust like it had been left there on purpose. No label, no information, just a faded strip of film that seemed oddly inviting. I decided to play it. It was around midnight when I set up the projector. The theater was empty, just how I liked it. The film flickered to life, grainy and distorted, showing a street scene. It was quiet at first, no sound. The camera slowly zoomed in on a lone figure walking down the sidewalk. I leaned forward, intrigued. The figure was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, the kind from the 1940s. His face was out of focus, just a blur of gray. He moved slowly, deliberately, as though the world around him didn't exist. Then, the streetlights flickered. I froze. The figure stopped and turned toward the camera. He looked directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. The camera shifted. Now it was focused on the interior of the cinema. The seats were filled with people, all sitting still, faces hidden in shadow. I recognized a few of them, but the rest, I didn't. They were all watching the screen. Then, one by one, they began to turn their heads toward me. I turned around. No one was there. When I looked back at the screen, the people in the seats were closer. The film was distorted, the frame shaking as if something was interfering with the projector dot. And then the man in the suit appeared in the theater, standing at the back, staring at me with those hollow eyes. I jumped to my feet, but the film kept playing, the man moving closer, his smile widening with every frame. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The film sped up, and the people in the seats now crowded around the screen. They weren't watching the film anymore. They were staring at me. Then everything went dark. The theater was silent. I don't remember running out of the projection booth. I don't remember leaving the theater, but somehow I found myself standing outside, shaking uncontrollably. The next morning, I went back to the theater. The reel was gone. The projector was off. The seats were empty. But when I looked at the screen, I saw the man in the suit, standing in the frame, looking out into the audience. I never went back. But sometimes, when I walk past cinema, I swear I see the lights flicker, and I know he's still watching. My name is Joel, and I used to love working the night shift at the Crescent Cinema. But after that night, I don't think I'll ever step into a theater again. It was a slow evening only. A handful of customers had come in. By the last showing, the place was practically empty. At 11:45 p.m., the final credits rolled in Theater 3. Everyone had left, or so I thought. I went in to do a quick cleanup, sweeping up spilled popcorn and collecting abandoned cups. The screen was still on, casting a dim glow over the seats. That's when I saw him, a man sitting in the very last row. He was completely still, facing forward, as if the movie hadn't ended. "Sir," I called. No response. I sighed and stepped closer. "The theater's closed." "You have to." He turned his head. My stomach dropped. His face was wrong. It wasn't just pale, it was blurred, like a smudged photo. His eyes were too dark, too empty. And then he smiled. Not a normal smile. A slow, deliberate stretch of his lips, wider than it should have been. I stumbled back. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my radio. But before I could speak, the screen flickered. The credits were rolling again, but instead of actors' names, it was something else. A list of dates. The most recent one was that very night. Next to it, a name. Joel Carter. My name. The lights cut out. I ran. I don't remember how I got to the lobby, but I didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping for breath. The next morning, I told my manager what had happened. He paled. "The last matinee," he whispered. "You saw him?" I begged him to explain, but he just shook his head and handed me my final paycheck. I didn't argue. I just took the money and left. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't been near a theater since, but every night, I hear the hum of a projector in my apartment, and I know my name was in the credits. That means my show isn't over yet. My name is Travis, and I was the only one in the theater that night. At least, that's what I thought. I had just started working at the Regal Crest Cinema, a rundown theater that barely saw customers. My manager, an old guy named Walter, gave me a simple rule. Never start a movie after closing. I broke that rule. It was past midnight, and I was bored. I found an old reel labeled silent screening, -1931. No studio name, no details. Just that title. I loaded it into the projector, grabbed some popcorn, and sat in the back of Theater 6. Big mistake. The film started without sound. The screen showed an empty stage, the kind used for live performances. Heavy red curtains swayed as if something was moving behind them. But there was no wind. The camera held on the curtain for too long. 5 minutes, 10, 15. I felt uneasy, like I was waiting for something awful to happen. Then, the curtains parted. A man stepped onto the stage. No, not a man. His limbs were too long, his movements too stiff, like an old marionette. Without strings, his face was pale, featureless, except for a gaping mouth stretched in a silent scream. He turned, looked straight into the camera. The lights in the theater flickered. I gripped the seat, my pulse hammering. On screen, the figure twitched, stepping closer. The camera angle shifted, tilting, shaking like the cameraman was running. A shadow passed in front of the lens, and then the screen cut to black. The theater went silent, too silent. No hum of the projector, no faint buzz from the lights, just nothing. I stood up, every nerve in my body screaming at me to leave. But as I turned toward the exit, I froze. Someone was sitting in the front row. They hadn't been there before. A single figure, dressed in an old-fashioned suit, perfectly still. I couldn't see his face. I didn't want to. I bolted, ran through the empty lobby, burst out into the cold night. The second I stepped outside, the sounds of the world returned. Traffic, distant voices, the hum of streetlights, but the theater behind me remained silent. I quit the next day. Walter didn't ask why. He just nodded and muttered, "Told you not to start a movie." I don't know what I watched that night. I don't know who or what sat in the front row. But I know one thing. Some films aren't meant to be seen. My name is Ryan, and I used to love watching horror movies. But after what happened at the Grandview Theater, I can't even look at a screen anymore. It was supposed to be a normal closing shift. The last showing had ended, the customers had left, and I was making my final rounds. Everything was routine until I passed Theater 7. The screen was still on. I frowned. We hadn't scheduled any late-night films. I peeked inside. The seats were empty, but the projector whirred softly, playing something I didn't recognize. Black and white footage flickered on the screen. It showed the theater's lobby, our lobby. The camera angle was high, like it had been filmed from the security cameras, and then I saw myself. I was on screen, standing right where I was now, peering into Theater 7. My breath hitched. I lifted my hand slowly, and the me in the film did the same. Perfectly synchronized. Then, in the background of the footage, something moved. A figure. It emerged from the darkness of the theater behind me. I spun around, nothing on the screen. The figure stepped closer. My heart pounded as I turned back to the film. It was a tall, shadowed shape, its face obscured, moving toward me, like a glitch in reality. I reached for my radio to call security, but my fingers trembled too much. The figure in the film was almost at me now, its outline flickering like a broken projection, and then it stopped. Right behind me, the screen went black. The air around me turned ice cold. I bolted. I ran straight to the lobby, nearly breaking the exit door's lock as I shoved my way outside. I didn't stop running until I was blocks away, gasping for breath under the buzzing glow of a street lamp. The next morning, I quit. I never went back. But sometimes, when I pass by the Grandview, I swear I see something through the glass doors. Something standing just inside the lobby, waiting. And worst of all, the marquee still has my name on it. Now playing, Ryan, final show. My name is Ethan, and I made the mistake of playing a film that should never have been watched. I work at the Orion Theater, an old, nearly abandoned cinema that only stays open because of nostalgia. On slow nights, I sometimes explore the storage rooms, sifting through dusty film reels and forgotten posters. That's how I found it. A tin canister, unmarked, buried beneath a pile of outdated reels. No label, no markings, just a rusted container that felt heavier than it should have. Curiosity got the best of me. I carried it up to the projection room and loaded it into the old reel-to-reel projector. The film was silent, black and white, crackling with age. The screen showed an empty theater, our theater. The seats were all vacant at first. Then, one by one, they started to fill. Figures faded into existence like shadows melting into place. They sat motionless, staring straight ahead. Their faces, I couldn't make them out, blurred, distorted, as if the film refused to capture them properly. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I turned to leave, but the door locked. I hadn't locked it. My breath came faster. The film flickered. The figures in the audience shifted, all turning their heads in unison. Not toward the screen, toward me. The projector groaned. The image distorted. The camera angle changed. Now, it was showing the projection booth. My booth. My hands shook as I reached for the power switch. But before I could touch it, the bulb burst. The room plunged into darkness. A whisper slithered through the air, not from the speakers, from behind me. I don't remember unlocking the door. I don't remember running down the emergency exit. But I remember the cold, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against me as I stumbled into the street. The next day, I went back. The reel was gone. The tin canister, missing. No one had seen it. No one believed me. But at night, when I try to sleep, I hear the whisper again. And I know the film is still playing somewhere, waiting for its next audience. My name is Daniel, and I was the last person to leave the Crestwood Cinema before it shut down. But I wasn't alone. The theater had been struggling for years. Leaky ceilings, broken seats, barely any customers. Last week, the owner finally called. It quits. My job as a night shift supervisor ended with a simple task. Lock up one final time. Easy enough. Or so I thought. At around 11:45 p.m., as I did my last walkthrough, I heard a muffled sound coming from Theater 5. The problem? We hadn't had a showing in there all day. I pushed the door open. The projector was running. The screen flickered with grainy sepia-toned footage. An old movie. No, it was security footage. From inside the theater, the seats were full. People sat motionless, their backs straight, all facing forward. But the theater was empty. I swallowed hard and looked around. Rows and rows of vacant seats. Nothing there. But on the screen, they remained then, in perfect unison. Every figure in the footage turned their heads, not toward the screen, toward me. I staggered backward, my pulse hammering in my ears. The figures in the footage stared blankly, faces pale, sunken, and then, almost imperceptibly, they began to rise. A sound echoed behind me, creaking seats, shifting. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the lobby. The doors locked. My shaking hands fumbled with the keys, dropping them twice before finally getting one into the slot. As I turned the key, I made the mistake of glancing back. The entrance to Theater 5 stood open, and figures were stepping out. I didn't look at their faces. I couldn't. I wrenched the door open and stumbled outside. The second my feet hit the pavement, the sound stopped. No footsteps, no movement, just silence. I turned. The Crestwood Cinema stood dark and lifeless. I quit that night, but sometimes I swear I see those figures in my dreams, waiting, watching. And I know one thing for certain. The theater may have closed its doors, but the last showing never ended. My name is Jake, and I used to dream of being a filmmaker. Now, I just want to survive. I worked the night shift at the old Bellevue Theater, a nearly abandoned cinema that only screens indie films and cult classics. It's always quiet, Barely. Any customers? But last night, something changed. At around midnight, as I was cleaning up, the projector in Theater 3 turned on by itself. The schedule was clear, no late-night showings. I went to check, thinking maybe someone had left a reel running by mistake. The theater was empty. The film on screen was black and white, grainy, like an old silent movie. It showed a dimly lit hallway, one that looked eerily familiar. As I watched, a shadow moved across the frame. A man appeared, dressed in an old-fashioned suit, his face obscured. He walked slowly, deliberately, toward a door at the end of the hallway. I realized why it looked familiar. It was the hallway leading to the projection booth. My breath caught in my throat. The man in the film reached for the door handle. On screen, the camera angle shifted, showing the other side of the door inside the booth. Inside my booth, I turned around so fast, I nearly tripped over myself. The door was closed, locked. I hadn't locked it. On screen, the door in the film creaked open. A figure stepped inside. I banged on the door, trying to force it open. The film flickered. The camera zoomed in. The figure's hand reached toward something. The light switch. The screen cut to black dot, and so did the room. Everything went dark. I don't remember much after that. Just running, stumbling down the emergency exit. Cold air slapping me in the face as I burst into the street. The manager found me outside the next morning, shaking. My uniform covered in dust, like I had been lying there all night. I don't know what I saw. I don't know who or what was in that film. But I know one thing. The Bellevue Theater is showing a new movie tonight, and I'm not staying to watch. My name is Ethan, and I have never believed in ghosts until the night I stayed late at the Rialto Theater. The Rialto is one of those old, forgotten cinemas that should have shut down years ago. The carpets are stained, the seats creak, and most of the projectors have been replaced with cheap digital screens. But there's one room they never upgraded, Theater 6. It's the only one that still runs on film reels, and no one ever uses it. Not because it's broken, but because of the stories. Employees whisper about a movie that plays there on its own. A silent film, one that was never in our inventory. They say if you watch it, something watches you back. I always thought it was a joke. Then, last Friday, I had to lock up alone. I was walking past Theater 6 when I heard the soft, rhythmic clicking of a film reel spinning. I stopped. The theater was supposed to be empty. The door was slightly open. Against my better judgment, I pushed it wider and stepped inside. The screen was lit up, casting an eerie glow over the vacant seats. But the film, it was strange. It showed an old theater, much like the Rialto, but dimly lit. The audience was dressed in outdated clothing suits, hats, long dresses, like something out of the 1920s. They all sat perfectly still, facing forward, watching something I couldn't see. Then, one by one, their heads turned, not toward the screen, toward me. I staggered backward, my breath caught in my throat. The figures in the film stared at me with hollow, empty eyes. Their mouths moved, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then, the camera in the film panned. It was showing the entrance of Theater 6. I spun around. The door behind me was closed. On screen, the camera slowly zoomed in. The door in the film creaked open. A shadowed figure stepped inside. My heart pounded. I turned to run, but the theater was no longer empty. Rows and rows of people, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, sat motionless in the seats. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes black voids. They weren't there a second ago. The film flickered. The figure on screen took another step into the theater closer. I bolted for the exit, shoving the door open and tumbling into the hallway. I didn't stop running until I was out of the theater, gasping for breath under the buzzing neon lights of the marquee. When I looked back, The screen inside Theater 6 had gone dark. The room was empty. The next morning, I tried to tell my manager. He just stared at me and said, "Theater 6 has been locked for years." Then who opened the door? My name is Lucas, and I used to love horror movies until I became part of one. I work as a projectionist at the Regal Grand, a rundown movie theater on the edge of town. It's one of those places that time forgot, with its peeling red velvet seats and a faint smell of butter-soaked nostalgia. We still project films on reels, something rare in this digital age. That's part of the charm, or at least it was. A few weeks ago, my manager, Richard, found an old film canister buried deep in the storage room. It had no label, no markings, nothing. Just a rusted tin with a thick layer of dust. He handed it to me, a mischievous grin on his face. "Think you can screen this for me tonight, Lucas? Maybe we found a lost classic." I should have said no. That night, after the last customers left, I set up the reel in the projector and hit play. The film flickered to life on the screen in the empty auditorium. At first, it was just static. Then, slowly, an image appeared, grainy black and white footage of an old theater, eerily similar to ours. The seats, the curtains, even the lobby. It was identical. Then I saw them. The audience in the film wasn't watching a movie. They were staring directly at me. I turned around, expecting an empty room, but my stomach dropped. There were people in the seats, now silent, motionless figures, their faces shadowed. They hadn't been there a second ago. The film continued. On screen, the camera panned to the projection booth. A man stood there, his back turned to me, adjusting the reels. But when he slowly turned around, my blood turned to ice. It was me. I stepped away from the projector, my hands shaking. The Lucas on the screen raised his hand and pointed at me. The figures in the audience rose from their seats. I ran. I don't know how I made it out, but I burst through the theater doors and into the cold night air. When I turned back, the screen was blank, the room empty. I told Richard what happened, but he just laughed. The next night, he stayed late to watch the film himself. He never came back. The police found his shoes in the middle of the auditorium, but nothing else. No body, no sign of struggle. Just his empty shoes. I quit the next day, but sometimes, late at night, I hear the sound of a film reel spinning, and I wonder if Richard is still watching, or if he's part of the film now.